Hello, good morning, everybody from Mystery Island. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to McDuff Lives. Thank you for joining me, whether you're on Facebook or McDuff Lives 1 on YouTube. We are suspending our broadcasts on McDuff Lives 2 and 3 because they both have strikes right now. So we are hoping that McDuff Lives 1 can survive. That's why we're here. And, behind the scenes, we are working on a solution. My my wife and our great friend Catherine Jumping Mouse are working together to get us an alternate so that we can not be constrained by the YouTube gods, whatever you want to call them. Anyway, good morning. Good morning, Kathy Sue. Thank you so much. You're always such a wonderful, wonderful person to talk to and to be around. And so we got to get together again. Corky, feel the same about you. Colleen and Deborah's here. Hi, Deborah. Robert, Norman, and hello, Laura. And blessed 2023 to each of you also. Um, the future is spotless, right? Let's not screw it up. Yeah, I see Olivia's looking over my shoulder there. What do you think, Olivia? You have anything to say? Up. All right. There you go. That's Olivia. She flew here one day from Kathy Sue's house. I don't know how she knew how to get here, but we're glad she did. And over my shoulder here, of course, my dad. The only portrait he ever had done. I think he was 48 years old when this was done, and so glad he did. It's a fantastic picture. Okay, content this morning was going to be this wonderful book, A Law Unto Itself, and I changed my mind because over the weekend I've been really thinking a lot about the hepatitis B question that I raised with in Twitter, really, and I've been working on it ever since. As you probably know, one of the craziest coincidences of my dad's life. Excuse me a second. I hear an echo, and I'm just going to go deal with it. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. I have speakers on in the other room, and it can be distracting. Yeah, I'm thinking Rumble. I'm actually thinking Rumble myself, but we'll see. Anyway, we're here, and you're here, and thank you for being here. Yeah, welcome if you're on Facebook as well. That's growing and growing very fast. Appreciate everyone at Facebook sharing the feed and letting people know how to subscribe to McDuff Lives on Facebook. Well, this is my book, and on page 41 of the book, I talk about how my dad, Tom O'Loughlin, was recruited to SACSA, and how SACSA was the vehicle that President Kennedy wanted to use in the Pentagon to take all the special operations away from the CIA and also from the DIA and all of the other active intelligence agencies of the time. We're talking 1961. And so my dad was recruited to be a part of that new organization working directly under the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and that was called SACSA, SACSA. Well, When when he filled out his application, he well, he turned it in. I'm sorry, I'm just refreshing myself. And we get to the issue of hepatitis here on page 42. Shortly after Tom accepted the position of counterinsurgency planner at the Pentagon, he was stricken sick with hepatitis, which very nearly killed him. He was hospitalized and told Mama that he had been out with colleagues and had consumed tainted shellfish. He never spoke about it again, although he suffered greatly from the illness. After he was released from the hospital, he spent 2 weeks in bed at home, never leaving the bedroom except to use the bathroom. He was jaundiced and weak as he recovered. There was no report in the newspaper of any shellfish poisoning being detected in local food supplies, no investigation of the restaurant supposedly involved. I don't think his illness was accidental. And then I talk about how I spoke to Wayne Madsen about this, and he's an investigative journalist who explained that the CIA has a history of compromising people's health, especially in the government, in order to impair their ability to work effectively in their positions. So, and as I've said many times, my dad would not have consumed tainted shellfish. It makes no sense. He was one of the most cautious and careful and prudent people you ever meet. He was the guy that put 2 layers of suntan lotion on us when we went to the beach, knowing of the risk of skin cancer. So the idea that a family man, would take a risk like consuming tainted shellfish is really just out of the question. But he never said another word about it, and we never found anything about details about what restaurant, or did anybody else get sick, or what did the health insurance, I mean, did the health inspectors go? And I mean, it was just nothing. So anyway, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Maybe he really did go and eat some nasty mussels in some dive somewhere in, you know, his his haunts when he was out there acting as an FBI agent. It's not impossible, but it doesn't make sense to me, especially when you consider the timing and the motivation of an Alan Dulles to control someone who's going to be in charge of all the plans for all the special ops from then on into the Kennedy administration. I missed a speaker. I'm going to be right back again. Corky says his mom would use Wesson oil. Oh yeah, and my mother would too. My mother loved to suntan, and she was, like the opposite of my dad. She would she'd go lay in the sun for hours, and but that was she was from Georgia and he was from Connecticut. Difference, many differences. Um, just take this opportunity to read this Joint Chiefs of Staff um, memorandum from Colonel Richard H. Moore, the executive of SACSA, on 26th of April 1962, in which he says that Mr. Thomas F. O'Loughlin was hired on April 2nd, 1962, as a planning specialist to work in the Special Plans and Operations Branch, Office of the Special Assistant for Counterinsurgency and Special Activities, SACSA, Joint Staff. After working in this position for 2 weeks and 2 days, Mr. O'Loughlin was taken ill with hepatitis, and is currently in the Washington Hospital Center. Mr. O'Loughlin has no sick leave to his credit from his previous employment. Mr. O'Loughlin came to the joint staff from the Federal Bureau of Investigation and was asked for by name due to his special background knowledge that met the qualifications of this position. There's a significant language there. I mean, he was one of FBI top people for dealing with um, spooks. Mr. O'Loughlin has been known to certain members of the Joint Staff for the past several years through almost daily contact, and it was only after several interviews and checking that Mr. O'Loughlin was recommended for this position. Based upon Mr. O'Loughlin's background record and service with the FBI, I recommend that the former request submitted by the Joint Chiefs of Staff Personnel Branch for 30 days advance sick leave be approved. So he didn't have sick leave, and so this memorandum is generated to give him the sick leave. And as a result of that, we learn that these details of why he was so important to SACSA. And so when we know how important he was to SACSA, we know how important it was for Alan Dulles to shut him down, right? Alan Dulles had been fired, right? But he's still running things out of his Georgetown townhouse. Richard Bissell from Hartford, Connecticut, how maybe less than a mile away, a few miles away. They grew up, Bissell was about 10 years older than McDuff was, but I mean, these people knew him, and they knew that he was probably the most potent advocate for taking these special ops, not advocate, but you know what I'm trying to say, that he was a very, very potent man in terms of being able to do what Kennedy wanted. And that was to take the special ops away from the CIA. Even though Dulles, even though Bissell were already gone, they still had control over lots of spooky stuff. And to get rid of my dad, I think, or at least to compromise him under what they call the Health Alteration Committee's work. Again, a CIA project. Read about it more in the book, please. It's available on Amazon. And the end of the book is where I'm picking up right now. I'm saying I'm going to do more work on this. I'm not going to let it sit. I finished this book about 2 years ago. While this book provides a history of Tom's career, it does not delve into the medical questions that arise. Questions of the possible use of drugs in an attempt to modify Tom's behavior via the MK Ultra program remain open for further investigation. The virus theory of cancer is still unsettled, yet the questions linger. And again, I had certain leads at that time, but I didn't have time or hadn't followed them up and felt like I wanted to just get the basic employment facts out. And that's what this book does. Well, anyway, now I'm going to jump into the hepatitis B question by reading and along with you trying to understand what reading between the lines. That's what we're going to be doing here with this article called Beyond Discovery, the Hepatitis B Story, written in 2000 by the National Academy of Sciences. So they must be right, right? Okay, I'm going to share this screen so hopefully you can, if you wish to, you can read along or maybe just read it later. but I really want to get into this. The name of my book is McDuff Lives. McDuff Lives with an exclamation point, and that's the name of my show, although no exclamation point because they don't allow that in titles of YouTube videos. But it's McDuff Lives. Now, I want you guys to be thinking and taking notes and things and help. If you're watching this after the live, then that's even better because you can slow it down and make some notes as we go along. As you probably know some leads that I don't know. And even if you don't, you might want to do some Google compound searching, like put hepatitis and 1960 and do a search. I'm just giving you an example of a way that you can make a lot of progress by just putting two similar but not exact things in the search engine and see what you come up with. I do it all the time. All right. Because there's so much out there, guys. There's just so much out there. And if you don't look, you'll never find it. Make this a little bigger so you can see it better. Oh, there goes Toto. Must have been Rom driving by with his ambulance. Beyond Discovery, The Path from Research to Human Benefit. This article was published in 2000 and has not been updated or revised. And I think that's a good thing, as you'll see in a few minutes. The hepatitis B story. And one more preface, if I may. I did not know that there was such a thing as hepatitis B, C, D, and whether, it was important to distinguish them. And I particularly did not know that back in 1962 that there was already a distinction between hepatitis, which they now call hepatitis A, and hepatitis B. But it's a very, very important distinction. So let's start. Debilitating and deadly, has plagued humankind since the beginning of recorded history. But the course of this disease was irrevocably changed with the accidental convergence of a medical researcher curious about why some people are especially prone to various ailments, another medical researcher wondering why people often become sick after receiving blood transfusions, and the blood of an Australian Aborigine. That convergence led to a discovery that in less than a decade spurred a blood screening campaign that dramatically reduced the incidence of hepatitis spread by blood transfusions, hepatitis B. The discovery also led to a highly effective hepatitis vaccine that not only introduced a novel way of protecting people from infectious diseases, but also is the first effective vaccine against liver cancer. Yet the scientists whose work revolutionized the study of hepatitis did not even have the disease in mind when they embarked on their investigations. As often happens in science and medicine, the landmark discovery grew not out of targeted research, but from studies aimed at answering more fundamental questions about nature. Let me read that again. The landmark discovery grew not out of targeted research. Okay, they weren't looking for a vaccine for hepatitis B. Okay, no. What were they looking for? They were making studies aimed at answering more fundamental questions about nature. This is where I get into beginning of my skepticism is anchored in this thought that, you know, the main question is, how does humanity tick? What are the building blocks of humanity? And when they decided that the germ theory was the way to go, in other words, illness comes from some little thing that gets inside of your body, right? It's a germ or it's a whatever, okay? It's a bacterium, it's an infection. It's a chemical. Well, they start using the V word. It's a virus. Okay. So the following article, adapted in part from an account by researcher Baruch Bloomberg. Baruch Bloomberg is somebody you need to know. And look at David Cranmer Underdown's work on that on Twitter for a quick review, or just Google him. He's everywhere. He's one of those people that's just like, wow, now he's here and now he's there. And he ends up at NASA. Somebody to take a deep look at, Baruch Bloomberg, who shared the 1976 Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine, explores the trail of research that led to the discovery of many of the viruses that cause hepatitis, and to blood screening for and revolutionary vaccines against some of them. It provides a dramatic example of how science works. Okay? This is all about how big questions are solved. Okay? They weren't looking for a vaccine for hepatitis. They were looking for the Lego pieces. What's that little bitty building block of life that I can then manipulate because I want to play God. That's what I think they're doing. I think they just really want to understand how humanity ticks. And then, well, because they're so wise, to kind of nudge us here and there. Yeah. So that wasn't, the motto. They weren't looking for something to improve our health. They were looking for something to understand how we work. And that, to me, is consonant with what Mark Kulak has been working on with regard to our current therapies, as he calls them. Hepatitis B, a debilitating disease. Viral hepatitis is one of the most common infectious diseases, causing an estimated 1.5 million deaths worldwide each year. The distinctive yellow jaundice that hepatitis B usually imparts to its victim's skin has made it an easily detectable disease throughout recorded history. Wait a minute. Now, remember, this is the National Academy of Sciences that's saying this, right? I got to break this down. Viral hepatitis, okay? Hepatitis that comes from a virus, as opposed to hepatitis that comes from, say, alcoholism, or hepatitis that comes from some other irritation of the liver that is not from a little bitty tiny Lego piece, okay? A little germy thing. But this is called viral hepatitis, causing an estimated 1.5 million deaths worldwide every year. The distinctive yellow jaundice that hepatitis B usually imparts to its victim's skin. Hang on. Distinctive yellow jaundice. So it's not like the same yellow jaundice that you get with yellow fever. So I can tell if you got yellow fever or Hep B because your yellow jaundice is distinctive. It's different from the jaundice that you get from Hep A or from anything else that gives you jaundice, right? That's what he's saying. It's distinctive. Has made it an easily detectable disease throughout recorded history. So we've had Hep B throughout recorded history. Because every time somebody turns this particular distinctive jaundice yellow, it's a Hep B case. That's the science as of year 2000, folks. It doesn't make sense. It's just sloppy writing, maybe is the best way I can call it, because, yeah, there's a lot more things that give you jaundice besides Hep B. Other telltale signs of the acute disease are fever, chills, fatigue, nausea, loss of appetite, and abdominal pain. Well, tell me one other form of hepatitis that doesn't give you the same thing. Tell me yellow fever doesn't give you the same thing. And tell me that malaria doesn't give you the same thing. Symptoms usually subside after several weeks, although some people experience a severe form of hepatitis B that is rapidly fatal. The acute disease is not the only way that hepatitis B affects humans, however. Some people with chronic hepatitis do not experience acute symptoms but may lose weight, feel tired, have abdominal pain and jaundice, and experience liver damage. In these cases, the disease continues to damage more of the liver over a period of 15 years or more until death ensues prematurely from liver failure or liver cancer. Also, a large number of people worldwide are carriers, meaning their immune systems tolerate the virus. Okay, just for the record, my dad had the hepatitis April 1962, was diagnosed with cancer in 1970, late 1970, and died in June of 1971. So that's a gap of 9 years. Carriers thus do not have any symptoms for many decades, but can unwittingly infect other people. Really? Are you sure? Have you really done some tests to say that? Are you just speculating? Or are you just throwing out some distraction so that we don't look for some real, actual, verifiable cause of Hep B? Oh, there's these carriers out there that just carry it around, and so they don't know they're going to make you sick. But more mysteries. Although hepatitis had been known for centuries, before World War II, doctors did not know that it was caused by a virus. See, now we get back to that other paragraph about how Hep B has been recognized for centuries. No, it hasn't. They didn't even know it was a virus. It was assumed to be contagious because epidemics of hepatitis often occurred in crowded, unsanitary conditions. But how it was passed from person to person was a mystery. So they thought it was contagious. That is, that I can cough and give it to you. Headway was into solving the mystery was made in the 1940s by a British doctor, F.O. McCallum, Maccallum, who specialized in liver disease. Well, all the alcohol they drink over there, I guess somebody better specialize in liver disease. I'm sorry, but F.O. McCallum is another one of these characters you got to get to know. I mean, I don't mean to disparage him. They didn't know what they were doing. The problem is they did it anyway. They're trying to solve a problem real fast. And so they cut corners and take risks. And, how common is that? It's a simple human failing that when we're under pressure to solve a problem, and, things happen. So, but this F.O. McCallum is a real interesting character to look at. He was concerned not so much with hepatitis. Once again, they don't care about hepatitis. But nevertheless, somehow they put together this, theory that such a thing as B is making people sick. He was not concerned so much with hepatitis as with the extremely deadly yellow fever transmitted by mosquitoes, which was killing soldiers in Africa and South America. Charged with the production of a yellow fever vaccine, McCallum was perplexed as to why a sizable proportion of soldiers who received the yellow fever vaccine developed hepatitis a few months later. Duh. Maybe there was something in the vaccine, do you think? Maybe. Hmm. The yellow fever vaccine contained human serum. Now, so you don't have to look it up. Serum is the liquid part of blood. It's the part that doesn't have the particles in it. It's just liquid. The yellow fever vaccine contained human serum, and McCallum was aware of other hepatitis cases reported in the medical literature that followed inoculation with vaccines containing human serum. He also knew of cases that followed the reuse of unsterilized syringes and needles in the treatment of diabetes or venereal disease, instruments that could contain particles of blood. McCallum came to suspect that a virus carried in human blood could cause hepatitis. Okay, a virus. Now, McCallum, he's British, okay? He's not a Rockefeller directly, but he is very connected. A series of observations of volunteers by McCallum and others during volunteers, quote unquote, during and shortly after the war strengthened the hypothesis and made it clear that hepatitis can also be spread by other means than through blood. Well, we knew that, right? For hundreds of years, right? McCallum coined the terms hepatitis A for the form of the disease that is spread primarily through food and water contaminated with minute quantities of fecal material, and hepatitis B for the form that is transmitted mainly by exposure to contaminated blood. Searching the blood for clues. During the next decade and a half, researchers at many laboratories tried in vain to isolate the infectious agents that cause the two types of hepatitis. Scientists suspected that the culprit organisms were viruses because they were small enough to pass through some of the smallest pore filters used in experiments. But the scientists were unable to grow them in order to identify and study them. Well, how frustrating. You've just decided to make a wide ranging investigation into what could be causing the hepatitis following inoculations, right? And so, in order to make sure you consider all of the possibilities, what do? Well, you assume that it's a virus. And then you look for the virus. And if you can't find the virus, then you try to find some way to imply that there is a virus. You said they couldn't grow it. They wanted to grow some. Well, why couldn't they grow it? Well, I don't know why, except for maybe it doesn't exist, or maybe the particles that they're calling the virus are dead and they can't reproduce. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I am also not going to put up with a bunch of what appears to be cover up propaganda for what they really knew was a problem. And the problem was the serum. Because if you go back and look at the serum that Dr. McCallum was putting into people, then you realize that, my God, he's taking blood serum from people that have all kinds of illnesses and then injecting that serum into other people to see what happens. That's what he was doing. I mean, taking fecal material and putting it into a serum and then injecting it into somebody. Is that science? No, that's just blind experimentation, you know? Who's paying for it? Well, the Army is, the British, for Dr. McCallum. Mm, These helpful Scottish doctors, gotta love them. All right, so they got frustrated. In the late 1950s, as a part of his basic research into inherited variations in blood proteins, Baruch Bloomberg, and there's a picture of him, began collecting blood samples from populations all over the world. Well, how did he do that? He stuck needles in them, didn't he? Did he clean the needles? Come on. Several years later, his efforts resulted in the discovery of the hepatitis B surface antigen, which is HBsAg, initially identified in the blood serum of an Australian Aborigine, a native people of Australia. I don't know if they still call them by that name or not, but we're talking about people whose bloodlines have been separated from the rest of the world for, what, I don't know how many thousands of years, but interesting that they found something in this Australian guy that they determined is the antigen of hepatitis B. The antigen is something that biology creates to fight against an infection, right? I'm not a doctor. I don't know these terms very well, but that's my understanding. Initially identified in the blood serum of an Australian Aborigine. Okay. By the mid 1960s, so after my dad's inoculation, or however it was done, by the mid 1960s, hepatitis research had reached a discouraging deadlock. Then a remarkable advance in the knowledge of the causes of hepatitis was made by someone who was not working on the disease at the time. It's another one of these, oh, wow, look, hey, this, yeah, let's do this. Baruch Bloomberg, a medical researcher specializing in internal medicine and biochemistry, was interested in a more basic question. Why were some people prone to particular diseases? As a medical student in the early 1950s, Bloomberg had conducted research in Suriname on elephantitis, a parasitic disease common in the tropics. His investigations showed that some of the ethnic populations in the town in which he worked were more susceptible to elephantiasis than others, even though everyone was apparently exposed to the same conditions. A few years later, he began to suspect that differences in susceptibility stemmed from variations in the genetic makeup of different ethnic populations. So this is the kind of thing that generates grant money, right? Oh, wait a minute. What if it's genetic? What if there's different genetic lines? And wow, oh, Mr. Rockefeller, I need some money. I got to study this. This is important. Because then you can find out, a little bit more information about the Lego blocks, Well, these Lego blocks are different from these Lego blocks. So this must be the reason why this guy's sick and this guy doesn't. Ah, wow. That's the kind of basic research that Baruch Bloomberg is interested in, pardon me. As a medical student, okay, I read that. But the tools of modern molecular biology that now allow scientists to link disease susceptibility to variations in genes had not yet been invented. Well, that's your money at work. We finally invented it, right? At the time, researchers trying to detect genetic differences that might be tied to disease susceptibility looked for inherited differences in specific blood proteins. These differences, called polymorphisms, were in some cases assumed to be maintained over generations because they gave those who carried them a survival advantage, such as resistance to a disease. Well, there's, Mr. Darwin's coming in saying, hey, Survival of the fittest, guys. That's the answer. Researchers had already discovered a number of polymorphisms in blood proteins. For example, the different blood proteins that determine type A, O, or B blood. But this field was vast and relatively unexplored terrain that promised to unlock the secrets of disease susceptibility. Well, why does it now they'd think it promises to unlock the secrets of disease susceptibility when a couple of years ago it was just an idea that hit the guy? So, oh, maybe it is. Well, now we know, yeah, it is. We just need to get those machines there, Mr. Rockefeller. In the late 1950s, Blumberg embarked on research aimed at finding new polymorphisms in blood proteins. To that end, he began collecting blood samples from populations all over the world. In the 1960s, Blumberg was at the National Institutes of Health, where he collaborated with biochemist Anthony Allison on a way to detect novel blood proteins quickly and easily. The scientists really reasoned that patients who received multiple blood transfusions had probably encountered blood proteins sufficiently different from their own to prompt their bodies to generate an immune reaction or antibodies against the foreign proteins or antigens. What did I just read? The scientists reasoned that patients who received multiple blood transfusions had probably encountered blood proteins sufficiently different from their own because it came from the serums that were used to make the yellow fever vaccine, which was a whole bunch of different disease particles mashed up together in one of those blenders and injected into volunteers, many of whom died. So they probably had encountered blood proteins sufficiently different from their own. That's not a virus, that's a blood protein. It came from a different human, or from a bird, or from a monkey, or from whoever else they used to test somebody whose serum then got mixed into the serum pool. Because they didn't care about the test subjects. They're looking for the Lego blocks of nature. Here, this is more important than any individual human. Don't you see? We're helping the great architect of the universe to fulfill his plans. Don't get in our way. That's that's the kind of mindset I really do believe has been prevailing in these people's minds that, hey, we're saving humanity here, So we lost a few along the way. They used a technique known as agar gel diffusion, which relies on the immune system's ability to spot minor differences in proteins and to produce an antigen antibody interaction in response to a novel blood protein. Not a virus, a novel blood protein. Agar gel diffusion involves the migration of proteins and antigen antibody complexes through gels. This technique detects the immune system's ability to spot minor differences in proteins and novel antigen antibody interactions. With the researchers coated First, the researchers coated glass slides with a gel, in the center of which they placed some serum from a patient who had received many transfusions. That sample was then surrounded by a gel containing sera from normal people who had not received transfusions. All the serum samples diffused slowly through the gel. If any components of the normal people's sera reacted with the antibodies from the patient's blood sample, a telltale white line appeared, indicating the presence of a combination of antigen and antibody in a concentration large enough to be detected. This reaction had two possible implications. One, that the transfused patient's blood contained antibodies that had been exposed before to antigens in the other people's sera, and two, that the material found in one person's serum might be sufficiently foreign to be an antigen to another person. Breakthrough blood sample. Meanwhile, reactions to someone else's blood were also of interest to blood specialist Harvey Alter at the NIH Blood Bank. Alter wanted to find out why some patients developed fever, chills, or rashes after blood transfusions. He thought they might be suffering from immune reactions to foreign proteins, i.e., antigens, in donated blood. Now, what I just said? When Alter learned that Bloomberg was looking for immune reactions in the blood of patients who had received many transfusions, he went to see him, and they decided to collaborate. Bloomberg and Alter used agar gel diffusion to test sera from patients who had received multiple transfusions, for example, hemophilia and leukemia patients, against panels of serum in Bloomberg's international collection from people of widely varied origins. In 1963, after months of experiments, the researchers discovered that serum from a New York hemophilia patient reacted with serum from a person residing in the opposite corner of the world, an Australian Aborigine. This finding was not unusual in itself. Up to that point, the transfused patient's blood in these experiments had reacted with high frequency to other sera, indicating that the patients had been exposed to many common antigens through transfusions. Transfusions are giving you all kinds of different antigens. Yeah, because they're based on different sera. As a result, though, it had not been possible to draw any definitive conclusions as to which antigen or antigens were causing the reaction until now. It turned out that in a particular experiment with the Australian Aborigines serum, only one of 24 hemophilia patients' sera reacted with it. The significance of this was exciting, for it implied that a single and rare antigen was causing the reaction. So, what was the antigen? Since it occurred only rarely, it was unlikely to be an antigen caused by genetic variation in human blood. Oh, well, it's not genetic then. Oh, instead, it was more likely to be from an infectious source. Intrigued by this question, although still not working on hepatitis B directly, Bloomberg and Alter tested the serum of the hemophiliac in question against thousands of serum samples. They found that samples from only 1 in 1,000 healthy, non hemophiliac American blood donors reacted with the hemophiliac serum, whereas samples from 1 in 10 of the leukemia patients reacted. Whatever antigen in the Australian Aborigines' blood had caused the reaction in Bloomberg and Alter's tests was also found often in the blood of leukemia patients. Moreover, the antigen was rarely found in normal patients' blood, but frequently in hemophiliacs and leukemia patients. The researchers labeled the mysterious protein Australian antigen, AA, in reference to the homeland of the Aborigine whose blood led to the discovery. They hypothesized. Okay, they're going to hypothesize now, so drum roll, okay, that an unknown antigen in the Australian Aborigines' blood was reacting with the antibodies in the blood of certain hemophilia and leukemia patients. Surprising finding. Bloomberg thought he might have detected an inherited blood protein polymorphism that affected people's susceptibility to leukemia. You got all those terms down now, right? Blood protein polymorphism, remember that one? That affected people's susceptibility to leukemia, which is cancer, right? But he knew that other possibilities, including an infectious agent like a virus, might explain the link between AA and leukemia. So he's not giving up on the virus. He's just not going to give up on it. To clarify that link, he began searching for AA in the blood of children with Down syndrome who run a particularly high risk of developing leukemia. Almost one-third of these children had AA. Bloomberg then tested Down patients of various ages who were housed in various settings. Newborn patients tested negative for AA, but the bigger the institution in which the patient resided, the more likely that he or she tested positive. This suggested that AA might be linked to an infection of some sort. Usually, the children who tested negative for AA remained negative when retested, and those who tested positive remained positive, as expected for a blood protein polymorphism. But in 1966, Bloomberg, Thomas London, and Alton Sutnick discovered that a 12-year-old boy with Down syndrome who had no trace of AA in his serum when he was first tested showed presence of the antigen in his blood a few months later. Significantly, this boy not only displayed AA by the agar gel diffusion test, but he also had hepatitis. Poor kid. How did he get hepatitis again? Explain that to me there. Immediately, researchers began exploring this hypothesis. In testing patients with and without hepatitis, they found that those with hepatitis tested positive for AA more often than those without the disease. The hypothesis was dramatically bolstered when Bloomberg's laboratory technician began to feel ill. Aware of the link between AA and hepatitis, she tested her own serum for the presence of AA and found it positive. She later developed hepatitis and became one of the first people whose viral hepatitis was diagnosed with the AA test. Okay. The AA test, because of the accidental infection of a lab assistant, became the diagnostic way to know whether there is a little bitty teeny tiny thing called a virus in there. And if you have AA, then you can bet, at least according to Dr. McCallum and Dr. Bloomberg, that you got a virus, buddy. Hearing of Blumberg's findings, virologist Alfred Prince of the New York Blood Center started an experiment in the mid-1960s that would eventually confirm the link between AA and hepatitis. Knowing that at least 1 in 10 patients who received multiple blood transfusions would come down with hepatitis. That's not good, is it? Prince wanted to determine whether AA appeared in the blood during the incubation period of the disease before any symptoms of illness, as would occur if AA were part of the virus that caused the hepatitis. The antigen part of the virus. Prince began taking blood samples from certain patients at the New York Blood Center at regular intervals and storing them in a freezer. Certain patients. How did he decide which ones? Finally, in 1968, he heard that a patient whose blood he had collected had developed clear symptoms of hepatitis. When he tested the man's blood samples, he found no evidence of AA in the early batches, but clear evidence of it in blood taken a few weeks before the onset of the illness. Such seemingly direct evidence strongly suggested that AA was indeed involved in the development of hepatitis B. Well, it's nearly noon, and I am about halfway through this text. I will leave you with their time chart up there so you can study that. Um, let's see, is that the beginning of it? Yeah, I guess this is just about the vaccine itself. When Wolf Zmunis, who was a refugee, by the way, from Poland, and Hilleman, who we know, and colleagues began testing tests of the Hep B vaccine. Well, I'll leave the rest of this for another another day, but I'm I'm just going to try to summarize what I'm saying so far in this article. That in the year 2000, the National Academy of Sciences would be assumed to be writing something completely authoritative about Hep B. And so far, other than the AA, the antigen, I haven't seen. I don't have there. I haven't seen direct evidence. Have they got it? Have they taken a photo of it, of this little virus thingy, or should we go back to the real motivation? When we go back to Dr. Baruch Bloomberg and what is he really looking for? And is he looking not to cure this particular disease so much as to study this disease, as to study, you know, how these things work. You know, when somebody is sick with something foreign in their body, in this case serum from a transfusion or a vaccine, how can you use that to understand the human body? And that, I think, is the big question that looms behind a lot of this virus vaccine research that we're facing today. And that brings me up to the great work of Mark Kulak and Nick and so many other people. JJ Cooey, I appreciate very much, and Dennis Rancour. Um, I, those are four that I'm really relying on right now. Um, I want to try to understand everything from many points of view, and that's why I have to have your help. So anything you can add to help me out with this, put it in the comments. Find me on Twitter. Send me a message at screamingospreys.com and or give me a call. I'd love to talk to you. Um, if there's something in specific, you know, that you think that I ought to look at, um, email it to me at koproductionsusa@gmail.com, and I will promise you to study it. Because because I'm not a doctor, but because this is my dad's story, it opens my mind to it in a way that I really couldn't do if I were just doing it as an exercise in trying to understand something in a field that I really don't have the expertise. But I do have a lot of legal pathways in my mind. It helps me sort out possibilities, and that's what I'm doing. I'm not providing any information here. I'm just giving you my thoughts as they come to me in McDuff's Mindfields. Thank you, guys.